All right, hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. I am Thomas and I do educational videos. Today is video number 100 on the reciprocal system of theory. This is a theory of everything that was discovered by Dewey B. Larson in the 20th century. And we're looking at his final book, Beyond Space and Time. This was his foray into metaphysics and, you know, philosophy, religion, psychology. All of his earlier books had to do with mostly the hard sciences, uh, chemistry and physics and astronomy, and also a couple books on economics. The basic idea behind the theory is that he believed in a universe of motion. The universe is not made out of matter, not made out of energy, but it was made out of motion. In fact, matter and energy were both certain kinds of motion. And in fact, all scientific phenomena were kinds of motion. Pressure was a kind of motion, and acceleration, and force, and gravity, and matter, and electric, magnetic flux, electric charge, electric current. These are all different kinds of motion. And motion, other people had come up with that in the past, the universe of motion. Thomas Hobbes, Rene Descartes, and I believe Arthur Eddington. But Larson took it a little further because he defined motion in a different way, as motion is the relationship between space and time. Space and time are reciprocals of each other. They are the same, except that they are inverted. One is the inverse of the other. And neither one of them have any existence except how they come together in motion. There's no time like abstracted out without space. And there is no space abstracted out without time. They both only appear together. It's kind of like the analogy that Larson uses is a box. If you have a box, you have the box, but you also have the inside of the box and you have the outside of the box. You can't have the box without having the inside and the outside. You can't have the inside without having the outside. So the box itself is the kind of the midpoint, and the inside of the box is space, and I guess it would be time in his analogy, and the outside of the box would be space. And space and time are both multidimensional, because that is what is all about space that we know. It is 3 or more dimensions. Therefore, time is also multidimensional like that. Time is flowing and progressing, and therefore space is also flowing and progressing. With time, it's always getting later and later and later. With space, things are always getting farther and farther apart. Also, space and time are both quantized. They come in only discrete units. There is no half units or quarter units or 3/10 of a unit. There's only 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4. You only have discrete units of time and space. And when you have 1 unit of space in 1 unit of time, that is the speed of light. And unlike what Einstein says, where the speed of light is the maximum speed of his static universe, you have Larson's universe of motion, where the speed of light is actually the midpoint or the null point or the origin of this universe. And in fact, you could think of the speed of light as being like the box, the boundary between the realm of time and the realm of space. So that's basically how it gets started. Now, if you start out, this has a number of advantages, and one of them is extrapolation. Uh, we know about this sector over here that is moving slower than the speed of light. We don't know about this sector over here that's moving faster than the speed of light. Larson calls this one sector 1, or the material sector. This one he calls sector 2, or the cosmic sector. What we know, though, about sector 1 can be applied or extrapolated to sector 2 simply by inverting the relationships of space and time. So inverting time and space. So what is all about space over here is all about time over here, and what is all about time over here is what all about space over here. So we can determine what's going on over here simply by knowing what's going on over here and inverting. And the way that kind of things work over here, because it's a fluid boundary. The boundary is the speed of light, so you can cross over from one side to the other. And if you have a sector 1 entity, atoms and molecules, they build up by aggregation till they get to their most complex level, which Larson calls DNA. A DNA molecule has billions of atoms in it. And at that point, the DNA molecule becomes eligible to be taken control over by a sector 2 entity. In the same way that a thermostat would take control of a room. It's a very small part of that room, but it controls the environment. And so too with sector 2 controlling the sector 1 entity. When those things come together, Larson calls that the life unit. Life is a combination of a sector 1 and sector 2 entity in the right proportions and in the right configuration. And a life unit then evolves or develops over time through from its initial single-celled organism level all the way up to its most complex level, which Larson calls the intelligent human being. And at that point, the intelligent human being becomes eligible to be controlled by a sector 3 entity. And sector 3 is this area that is beyond space and time, or independent of space and time. He calls that sector 3, or the metaphysical region. Other people would have used the word God, goddess, gods, the numinous, the religious, the spiritual. Larson calls it sector 3 in his very scientific way. And that sector 3 entity is good, and it is motivating us or controlling us toward good behavior, directing us toward good behavior, just behavior, ethical behavior, moral behavior. Whereas sector 2 is motivating us toward simply survival. At times, those things work together, and we have no problems. But at times they are conflicting, and then we have to step in as humans, as free will agents, and decide which we're going to choose. Are we going to be an animal bent on survival, or are we going to be a spiritual, ethical human being and directed by sector 3? So that's kind of what Larson is talking about in this book, Beyond Space and Time. We are about to embark on going over chapter 25, which is called Outlook for Communication. I'll start at the beginning. A striking characteristic of all of the means of obtaining information from metaphysical sources that we have examined, inductive insight, clairvoyance, religious revelation, and intuition in general, these are all sector 3 communications. They all are they're seen by us as being different, but they're all coming from the same place. They're all communications from sector 3, and they all have various levels of complexity, and they are always correct, but our ability to decode the message, to translate the message, is not always correct. Because you have to remember that we are analogous to a single-celled spiritual organism. We are just getting started on our journey here in the spiritual realm, in the same way that an amoeba or a planaria is just getting started in the life area. Okay, so we don't have all of the answers. We have the questions, we have the ability to get those answers, but we need to prepare ourselves and to practice receiving these messages. Okay, back to Larson. Inductive insight, clairvoyance, religious revelation, and intuition in general is that, as we now know them, they are wholly unpredictable and not subject to our control. The question naturally arises, is this necessarily true, or is the present situation merely a reflection of our almost total lack of knowledge as to the inherent nature and properties of the intersector communication phenomena? This is a question that has a profound significance for the future of the human race. Unfortunately, it is also a question which, as matters now stand, we cannot answer. The new information developed in the preceding pages does, however, clarify the nature of this problem to a considerable degree, and it suggests some lines of inquiry which, if they are followed up diligently and systematically, may ultimately produce some kind of an understanding of the situation. The most important discovery in this area made in the course of this present investigation is that all of the hitherto unexplained and somewhat mysterious processes by which information is obtained in a non-physical manner are manifestations of the same thing: communication between Sector 3 units through Sector 3 channels. In studying these various phenomena, therefore, we are no longer in the position of viewing a number of separate and presumably unrelated things. We now realize that we are viewing the same thing from a number of different angles. Such a finding is a great help to any investigation, but it is of particular importance in the study of elusive phenomena such as those that we are now considering, inasmuch as whatever is known or can be learned about any one of them can now be taken as applicable in some sense to the general process. The total amount of reliable information that is available is still small, to be sure, but it represents a big advance over the very meager amount of knowledge that we possess concerning any of the individual phenomena. All this suggests that conditions are now ripe for a thorough and systematic study of these related phenomena aimed at gaining understanding of the general process of non-physical communication. If we can attain such an understanding, we can then turn around and apply it to improving the effectiveness and usefulness of each of the individual applications of this communication process. Such an investigation is far beyond the scope of this present work, but since we have here developed the basic information that opens up an avenue of approach to this hitherto recalcitrant problem, or group of problems, it seems appropriate not only to point out the opportunity that is afforded by the new information that is now available, but also to discuss the existing situation briefly and to indicate some of the specific lines of inquiry that could be profitably followed. The most general form of this intersector communication, commonly called intuition, and defined as the direct apprehension of knowledge without conscious reasoning or immediate sense perception, is one about which practically nothing, aside from its existence, is currently known. There are even those who deny that it does exist in the sense of this definition. For instance, the empiricists, who regard the observed physical universe as the whole of existence, must necessarily reject it. But the extreme weakness of the arguments that these objectors are able to muster in support of their position is eloquent testimony to the reality of the process. But all they are able to suggest is that intuition must be the result of some unknown, abnormally rapid or subconscious thought process. As pointed out, though, reason-directed thinking is not a source of information. It is a tool for dealing with information obtained from some source. This means that the basic question is, what is the source of the intuitive information? In the preceding pages, we have examined this issue and have found that the information comes from a metaphysical source. The empiricists and materialists deny the existence of anything metaphysical, but they are unable to suggest any alternative. The only source of information that they recognize is experience, and the clearest and most definite instances of intuitive understanding occur in such areas as moral values, which the empiricists themselves admit cannot be derived from experience. Those of this school of thought who face the issue squarely recognize that their denial of the existence of intuition or any other non-experiential source of information forces them to deny the existence of moral values. But this is a denial of the observed reality. Both intuition and moral values do exist. And our findings now disclose that intuition is merely one of a number of manifestations of the general phenomenon of communication with Sector 3. It is certainly one of the aspects of the communication situation that should have a careful and painstaking study. Just how the problem can be best approached is not clear as matters now stand. But some ideas as to the direction of investigative efforts can probably be developed from consideration of the phenomena that is available with respect to the other communication phenomena that we have identified as different aspects of the same thing. The characteristics of scientific insight, another communication from Sector 3. The characteristics of scientific insight were discussed in Chapter 9, and no more needs to be said here other than to emphasize some of the principal points that were brought out in the earlier discussion. First, that such insight comes only when the general level of knowledge is high enough so that it is feasible to go the rest of the way to an understanding of the point at issue by means of an inductive leap. Second, that the insight comes only to those who are adequately prepared to receive it. And third, that it comes mainly, perhaps always, to individuals who are deeply immersed in the subject matter and have given it both extensive and intensive study. Revelation, another one of these Sector 3 communications, revelation is practically identical with scientific insight, except that it deals with religious information rather than scientific information. These two processes operate in the same manner as ordinary intuition, but they are actually of a somewhat different character. Ordinary intuition draws upon a basic supply of information which, under existing conditions, appears to be readily accessible to most individuals and can be obtained with little or no effort. Revelation and scientific insight, on the other hand, deal with more advanced and less easily comprehended truths that are not yet part of the general understanding, and consequently are available only to unusually well-prepared individuals who are also intensely motivated. The possible avenues of approach that can be followed in a systematic study are more clearly indicated here than in the case of ordinary intuition, as we do have some information as to who has reportedly received communications of the revelation or insight variety, and as to what conditions prevailed at the time. We note, for example, that a period of uninterrupted contemplation preceded many of the reported religious revelations. Most of the founders of the great religions are reported to have cut themselves off from normal human activities repeatedly or for extensive periods so that they could devote themselves completely to thinking about religious matters. The story of the Buddha is well known. how he left his high position and his family and wandered about for 7 years, pondering over the mysteries of existence until a revelation finally came to him. The experience of Mahavira, the founder of Jainism, is almost identical. Moses received his enlightenment during the 40 days that he spent alone on Mount Sinai. Zoroaster, or Zarathustra, founder of the religion now practiced by the Parsis, is said to have gained his insight while living as a hermit. Muhammad's revelation came to him in a cave on Mount Hira after repeated sojourns in the hills around Mecca, where he could be alone with his thoughts. Both religious contemplation and intense scientific concentration are relatively calm and tranquil activities, characterized primarily by channeling the maximum amount of thought into one area in which new insight is sought, to the exclusion, so far as possible, of all extraneous matters. The absent-mindedness of scientific investigators is proverbial and is standard practice, particularly in the Orient, for the seeker after religious truth to isolate himself not only from the affairs of the world, but also from his own personal desires. This might well suggest the conclusion that calm and peaceful concentration on the subject at hand is one of the requirements for successful Sector 3 communication. But the next type of communication that we will consider introduces a new factor. Most of the instances of spontaneous telepathic communication that are sufficiently well authenticated to entitle them to consideration in the present connection took place under conditions of extreme emotional stress. Okay, we will end it there, and I will say the same thing that I said yesterday. It's pretty clear that Larson didn't do a lot of meditating. To me, it's like the point about meditating is not thinking, but not thinking. Okay, we'll get back to this tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day.